So first I'll say being surrounded by Gary and Craig up here, I sort of feel like a Navy ship in the Arctic being surrounded by Coast Guard icebreakers. Exactly as it should be. So I want to congratulate the Consortium on Ocean Leadership for an amazing, oh yeah.
That was close, wasn't it?
Yeah, if I go down, is my slide going to come up now? Oh, yeah. Perfect. I want to congratulate the Consortium of Ocean Leadership, ensuring the PowerPoint works, for putting on an amazingly successful, sold-out, standing room only forum here. It's critically important, as we all know, and it's really a credit to the great work that is going on in the Arctic. Ms. Ulmer, I want to thank you for your remarks earlier. I want to thank you and the Arctic Research Commission for championing the research and really getting to answer your questions, Mr. Olmec, earlier, trying to herd the research cats, of which I can take some credit as being one of in my past, toward not being redundant and getting after some of the problems that we face in the Arctic. I also appreciate, ma'am, your comments on looking at research and how it relates to knowledge and decisions. And I would encourage every person who does research, scientific research, anything to do with oceanography, meteorology, the environment, think about the decision yet you're going to impact by your research. So whether you were doing research on the reproductive cycles of copepods and ice-covered waters, does that relate to food security in the Arctic and waters in the future? Heck yeah, it does. So think about that, and think about how you can talk about that, whether it's to fellow scientists or folks in the buildings not too far from here. So the Navy is serious about the Arctic. Just recently, Admiral Greenert testified last week to the House Appropriations Committee, and he talked about the Arctic and the Navy's efforts in the Arctic. Going back to Admiral Roughead in the slide that was shown earlier, we've been serious about the Arctic for some time and understanding what's going on in the Arctic. So the science needs are great, and we look at science needs in the Arctic in terms of capability. What do we need to be able to do in terms of research and making decisions today that we can't do? And also capacity. How, as we're going to operate more, what are the actual needs in terms of whether it's sensing capacity, processing capacity, and all those type of issues. So in order to make the right decisions, we need the best science. I'll leave it at that. From the updated Arctic roadmap about a year ago came on the streets. This is our, basically, a geographic type of prediction on how the minimum ice in the summer is going to unfold between now and 2030, as our roadmap goes out to 2030. This was not just based on drawing lines on a map in a bar somewhere. We have talked to a lot of folks that are represented by folks in this room. Certainly, your input was very important, Cecilia, as we talked to you at the Naval Studies Board. So, and this allows us to take a look at the shipping routes, at the areas that the Navy is likely to operate, and how much it's going to open up in the future. But it is just a broad prediction. And we understand that we need to be able to revise this as time goes on, but it gives us something to shoot for, and that's what our roadmap, we got to have something to start with. Not too dissimilar from last Friday. Some of you may have been looking at the weather patterns in DC and trying to plan when you might fly back to wherever you came from. You might have said, well, there's a couple of snowflakes on AccuWeather next Thursday, but you know, it doesn't look like it's going to be too bad. So you might have said, okay, well, I'll take a chance. Well, then Monday came around and you may have looked and said, wow, a few inches. Should I change my flight to either Wednesday night or Friday? Maybe some of you did, maybe some of you didn't, and you're saying, man, I really should have done that. We don't want to be the Navy in 2025 saying, wait, well, you know, maybe I really should have done something. So that's what making decisions, revising them is really all about from a personal perspective, and I hope none of you get stranded tomorrow, but my guess is at least someone in the room probably will. Arctic challenges that we need to apply science and research to. This is a slide that's at least 4 years old. And I put it up there for a reason. This is what, you know, I got inherited when I came into the job. And you can see a lot of these things haven't really changed. We know what the challenges are. We know what some of the gaps are. In sensing, forecasting, and predicting environmental conditions, certainly, as Gary talked about also, are critically important as a big part of what some of our needs are. So What's going to enable this? They're improving things like models and forecasts, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. New technology for hydrographic operations, unmanned vehicles, things that you can see up there, and we look for the future in DoD, hopefully, of having an Arctic Center of Excellence, where we can look at all the Arctic things that are going on and possibly work with other agencies and have a go-to point for Arctic operations in the future, possibly with our partners. So these are a lot of things that we're looking at to enable us to be able to operate the Navy safely in the Arctic, in open water, or maybe in ice water if we have ice-capable ships, and maybe with Coast Guard icebreakers, as I mentioned. The Navy has a national role in the Arctic, as is spelled out in the Arctic Implementation Plan. The National Arctic Strategy talks about national security and national defense. To improve our sea ice forecast was the Navy's job, looking at the Arctic Implementation Plan. DoD was given the role for that, and I checked with the Army. They don't do ice prediction in the Arctic. So they let us take care of that, and it's the great work of ONR and others that I'll talk about. We are taking that seriously. We also work with other agencies in other parts of the Arctic Implementation Plan. And a little note at the bottom under Title 10, we have a unique role in the Navy because of our maritime forecasting capability. We are responsible, if asked, to provide weather support to ships on the high seas. And we take that very seriously, and we want to be able to do that in the Arctic as well, a lot better than we can today. So what do we do today? We have the NOAA Navy National Ice Center. We have Dr. Pablo Colon over there, who's the NOAA civilian lead, and we have Commander Kelly Taylor on this side of the room. Doesn't mean they don't get along, by the way. They are sort of the co-leads and the CO of the Navy National Ice Center over here. And they provide today the type of things that you're seeing and have been providing it to decades. Our submarine force, as you saw in the first slide, needs to understand exactly what type of ice is where to be able to operate as they do today up there. So we're looking at these type of products right now. And it's very important to actually do this work. And we're very successful, but it's not where we want to be. Where we want to be in the future, and I'm going to talk about what ASPC is, for those of you who haven't heard it, just a moment. We need Arctic coupled models. So we're hoping by about 2022 to have that. A regional prediction, basin that can drive down to local prediction, and then going out to a 2-week forecast, 30, 60, 90-day outlooks. These are the kind of things that we are thinking about in the future, because these are the kind of things that we can do in other regions and basins of the world. Now, it's interesting in hearing the wonderful science talks earlier today, there is a conversation about what are the limits of our skill to predict. And certainly we heard some experts in there. A couple of months ago, Dr. Julian Strove from the National Snow and Ice Data Center also talked about what are the limits based on natural variability in the interannual predictions, the decadal predictions up in the Arctic of ice. And I don't think we know the answer to that. She sort of pointed that out. But we need to. And I think there might be some things that we could take away. I was just recently reading on the National Snow and Ice Data Center what the ice minimum in January was. We looked at September a lot today. I encourage you to go in there and roll back to January. I encourage you to look at January, the year and a half before the last 2 ice minimums, and you will see an ice minimum in that January as well. Not the same year, but a year and a half before. We also talk about a minimum sea level atmospheric pressure that we're seeing in the Arctic this year, as we see the 3rd lowest January ice extent on record. And what happens when you have a low in atmospheric sea level pressure in the Arctic? Highs, as the cold air reaches down here and gives us these wonderful afternoons that we have here in DC. But low pressure tends to push ice off the Siberian coastline and in the Chukchi Sea area, and you start to see some of the multi-year ice in the ensuing months and years start to flush out of Fram Strait. Is there any, you've seen it a couple of times, you can look at the curves on the graphs. This is PowerPoint analysis by me, by the way. But if I was a graduate student doing research in the Arctic, I'd be taking a look at those kind of things for a thesis. Are there some correlations like that we could start to get into some interannual predictions? I think there may be, the Arctic being such a closed basin, I don't know. I think there are questions worth asking. They would be very important to making the right decisions operationally and strategically, not just for the Navy. Earth system prediction capability, the national Earth system prediction capability is being championed now by the agencies that you see up there. Looking toward the future of developing a system, a prediction capability, a model, a system of models, an ensemble, 0 hour, to multi-decadal predictions of climate, ocean, atmosphere, and ice. How do we create for the United States and with our partners in the future, hopefully, a one-stop shopping? So instead of saying, well, this is what AccuWeather said, or this is what Weather Channel said, or this is what WeatherBug says, like the people in Europe say ECMWF said, should we be saying ESPC said? I think if we put our heads, put our resources together, again, back to the herding the cats, we can come up with this. We are championship. We have research money in the Navy that is dedicated to this right now because of the operational needs that we need that are well understood. Happy to talk about that offline. So, our Arctic roadmap I talked about, what are we doing to implement? How does this relate to some of the science? We're looking at maritime capabilities, engaging our partners, Arctic partners and others in many areas of looking at how do we do this together. The fleet guidance for Arctic operations and training, getting more and more experience training. The CNO talked about ISEX, or we used to be triennial, now it's going to be biannual, and he wants to go to annual ISEX, it's up on the ice. It involves the collection of a lot of scientific data and scientific research opportunities. The Office of Naval Research with the Science and Technology Plan, Dr. Martin Jeffries is right over there on the front row, on the corner there, can tell you a lot more about that. Just yesterday, we announced the Stratified Ocean Dynamics Arctic project. And this is a 5-year research project, and they're going to be taking offers from performers to be part of that program. Again, feel free to ask questions of Dr. Martin Jeffries about that. The Navy is serious. We're investing millions of dollars in Arctic research because of the need that Gary talked about. If we're going to, and believe me, I've heard this from several Fleet 4-stars, and I hear it on a basis. Don't talk to me about ice hardened ships, John, until you can talk to me about how you're going to be able to protect them with your forecasts in the Arctic. So it's an interesting sort of way to look at the world. Other things are involved. How do we improve data sharing and maritime domain awareness and all the engineering things? What are we missing? Paint that goes on boards at superstructures that the ice does not adhere to. ONR is also working on that. I'll offer to try that out on my driveway and sidewalk at home. The marginal ice zone experiment that was done last year that ONR also led, and some of you are involved in that, using unmanned vehicles, using sea gliders, wave gliders, floats, buoys, all kinds of things tethered together to get a time series across months and hopefully across years in the future of what the dynamics in the Arctic are so we can get after the ice production. We can also better understand the acoustic conditions for our submarine forts. What are those properties and how do we measure those? And you might have seen articles. There's some Arctic drones is one of the ones I read recently. Look at the headline, you almost think Martin Jeffries was developing armed unmanned vehicles undersea to go after ISIL in the undersea Arctic environment. It's not quite like that. But I will tell you, we are serious about the Arctic, as we have been, as was mentioned by the gentleman from AGU earlier, since the 1870s, when some folks on the USS Jeanette went up to the Arctic for a 1-year tour, ice over in the winter, come back in the summer. The ice didn't melt that following summer, and 2 years later, the ship was broken up and they had to get out via boats, and only one of the boats actually survived to the Siberian coastline. There's a book on that, Kingdom of the Ice, last year by Hampton Sides. I encourage you to read it if you haven't. But I will tell you 2 things. That just shows you the Navy, as explorers, along with the Coast Guard, are serious about the Arctic. We have been for a long time, and we are. We'll also show you that our ability to predict seasonal ice conditions are no better now than they were in the 1870s, largely. So we got to work on that. Thank you very much.